Yo, welcome to the next episode of Tribe Table Talk Podcast, gentlemen.
Yo,
We
yo,
are,
yo, yo.
this is episode 16. Episode 16.
16 episodes, man. We did it like that already?
Yep. So today is part 2 of our series entitled Top 10 Most Common Issues in Marriage. And today we are touching on boundaries. Fellas, ladies, what are some boundaries you have in your marriage? You see, when marriage happens, you got two imperfect people coming together for life. You have two people with possibly two total different backgrounds, total different family histories, total different upbringings. Sometimes in marriage, it's a case of opposites attract.
Yeah.
So when those two people come together, sometimes conflicts arise. Sometimes
they gonna arise.
sometimes personalities differ. So so today, guys, that's the topic we're talking about. We're putting it all on the table regarding boundaries in marriage. Let's get it.
Let's get it. Yeah. So let's define a boundary.
Absolutely.
So how would you define a boundary, Kenny?
I would say good question. I should have put up the Merriam-Webster. For real.
Yeah. So just thinking about it.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead, bro.
Gotcha. So a boundary is always something that is placed maybe in front of you, between you, or surrounding you, maybe to keep something out or keep something from coming in.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I was thinking about when I was thinking about boundaries, just in the literal sense. So, and I was talking to my wife about the subject, like trying to figure out, what kind of boundaries do we have in our marriage? What can we think of? And there's all types of boundaries. There's like financial boundaries. There's parental boundaries, romance boundaries, communication boundaries. And the more we talk, the more I'm like, there's boundaries all over the place. That's kind of what keeps everything together.
All right. All right. Yeah, really sit down and think about it. Like, next thing you know, all these things. Oh yeah, we do have those boundaries. It's just some things are just kind of unspoken, and you have to really kind of sit down and think about it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were coming up with a lot of things. And we were noticing that we have a lot of personal boundaries too. Because like you said, we're two different people. Two different personalities. She's a little bit more outgoing. I'm a little more reserved. And so respecting those personal boundaries that we have, I think, is super important. So, for example, if I'm more reserved and more introverted, she's not going to like randomly invite a bunch of people over, without talking to me about it, and just like having this big party, like everybody's coming over, and not talk to me about it and be like, go over it first. So like, is it okay if these people come over and we come hang out, we do something Friday, or did you want to just kind of hang tight and chill with the family? So it's just like those kind of things where you just respect those personal boundaries that we have and that we can't know unless, we continue to learn each other and figure out each other's quirks and personality traits and things like that. So
yeah.
I hear that.
It's funny because I can relate to that. It's always funny how two people who are very different or sometimes are opposite sides of the spectrum come together. It's almost like marriage in a lot of ways. Two people come together that complement each other.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you're more reserved. She's more outgoing. I could definitely relate to that because I kind of have that going on in my marriage. Yeah. And I remember sometimes how that would be a conflict where I'm very social. I can mingle amongst strangers, where my wife is not really comfortable with that. She's like, it's gonna be a bunch of people I don't know. I don't think I'm gonna go, and I'm like, yeah, you can put me in a room with anybody and I'll strike up a conversation. No matter their race, their upbringing, I can be like, hey, what's up, man? How you doing? My name's Kenny.
Yep.
And I remember there were times where I'm like, sometimes like, man, you need to be more social. Like, like you gotta talk more. Like you gotta, and learning, I had to learn over time that this is kind of who she is.
Yeah.
Stop trying to change her to be like you, because, she would have like a kind of like a always a loner type thing. And I'm like, well, I want to have people over, I want to be with people, and so it was like that clash between the extrovert and introvert, and how I had to learn how to navigate that, because I used to be like, man, I wish you would talk more. Like, I wish, like, man, you're too quiet, and learning how to like be patient with that, let her be her. That was a kind of a struggle for me at one point in my marriage. And I had to learn how to just, let her be herself. She does come out of her shell. We just have to, make the situation right, and also I had to learn the value of alone time. Like you said, your boundaries. Like she don't just invite people over. Well, like I can have people at my house every day. You know what I mean? Like it don't bother me. But my wife is like, no, I need my time to recharge.
Yeah.
And there are times where there are times when we would clash where I like, hey, such and such want to come over. Like I'm almost good with it. She's like, no, I don't really want anybody over right now. And then sometimes that would clash. What do you mean? Like, man, why you so like? It's like, man, why you kind of boring, She's like, no, and those conflicts. So I had to learn how to be like, touch base with her first. Like, hey, is it okay if such and such come over? Like, I know we just had somebody come over 2 days ago, but like, are you, and if she's not okay with it, learning to be like, okay, all right, that's cool. Well, it's like, it has this, I definitely understand that boundary issue in the case of sometimes, extrovert and introvert and
personal boundaries.
Yeah, personal boundaries. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That was something definitely I can relate to.
Yeah. I always tell my wife, we got to have some kind of protection. So that's how I look at a boundary. Like we need to have financial protection or, that time, personal time protection. Like if I'm spending time with the baby, like you go ahead and do what you need to do, relax, recharge, curse me out under your breath, whatever you need to do. I always say, like, we need that space or that moment that we can, express ourselves and however we need to do. So I look at boundary as protection or, staying behind a certain border, basically.
Okay. And that's important because we have to have boundaries on ourselves, like, because marriage is true. In marriage, two people become one. So in many ways they're united, they're one. And in a sense, all everything is on the table. All the guards come off, that's, you're one with that person. But at the same time, to keep your marriage healthy, you want to have those times where you can just be away from your spouse. You want to have times where you guys, as guys, we go out and hang out with the fellas, and that's okay. Wives, you have your times where you go out and have a ladies' night. And those things are important because, it doesn't mean that you love your spouse less if you want to sometimes spend time away from them, and hopefully maybe somebody who's listening who's kind of dealing with that right now, you do not love your spouse less because you want to go hang out with the guys and go play golf. Right? Ladies, give your man some space. Go hang out with the ladies sometimes. Because as men and as women, we have our own hobbies. We have different interests sometimes. And I think we should, obviously, as couples, you should spend time and do things together. You should have that recreational companionship. At the same time, you don't always like the same things. And if you don't give your spouse the space to do that, you kind of, you can maybe cause some resentment or like, oh, I'm always with my wife. Man, man, I wonder what the fellas are doing. You know, and that's healthy.
Yeah.
That's healthy for your relationship. You know, I don't sometimes, you know, I want to watch something different than my wife want to watch. And cool, I can watch what she want to watch with her sometimes, but I'm like, oh, cool, you like that. I'm gonna go over here and watch this. You know. So what do you guys feel about that?
I don't want people to think that like we're just trying to set a boundary around the relationship that we have with our wives. Like, yeah, we love our wives, but we're not saying get out of our face or nothing like that.
No,
I want to do me.
Nope.
Yeah, boundaries for me, like boundaries basically hold me accountable in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like it holds me accountable toward the relationship. It, humbles me as far as things that I'm willing to do and won't do. And I think it just trims some of this stuff out that basically is a hindrance toward the relationship between you and your wife. Like we set this boundary, or, I may overstep somewhere. If you don't tell me, then, how can we keep things in order, basically? Boundaries do a lot, man. I don't want to sound like a freaking essay, but boundaries are necessary. They are needed. And if you don't have them, you could skew the view of marriage, basically. So,
and you said something. It's like you don't know those boundaries until they come up. Until maybe some problems arise or through a conversation. So you're always setting boundaries, and that comes through your relationship with your wife. Because you don't know those boundaries yet. There's boundaries that we haven't set yet just because we haven't run into certain situations yet to be able to figure out, okay, there needs to be a boundary here to prevent this from happening again or that from happening again, or, to preserve, our relationship.
That's a good point. Yeah. Sometimes we know until some kind of conflict arises. And speaking of like spending time alone, I got a question for you guys. What are you guys' thoughts on how to deal with a spouse that may be a little too clingy? How do you
go
deal
ahead,
with that?
Cal? I'll let you go ahead and answer first, since you've been married longer. So
no, man, I'm still getting in, setting up new boundaries and stuff. But no, I think you touched on it already. Kenny, is just allowing that boundaries for personal space, right?
Yeah.
So if you feel like your spouse is being too clingy, or if, I think you just need to have those clear expectations of, yes, we both have our own hobbies. We should give each other room to express ourselves with those hobbies, whether it be hanging out with the fellas or the ladies, or hanging out. Or maybe it's just, for me, sometimes it's just, I need to take a break. I need maybe go play the video game or something. So I think it's just giving each other that healthy space and having each other respect that healthy boundary of allowing each other to have certain amount of space. So, and I think that starts with cultivating an environment from when you are together, making sure you set boundaries, which I think is even more important of when you are together. So that way, that time together is more quality.
Right.
And so when you do spend that time apart, it's not like you're pulling away from anything in the relationship, because you already spend a lot of quality time. So making sure that personal time that you have together is quality. That way it kind of sets up for you to have your own personal time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. I hear that. Go ahead, Kenny.
No, I was just gonna say that can be a tough conversation too.
Yeah.
Like, because you don't want to hurt the other person's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, if you have some kind of conversation, if that's a case in your marriage, it's going to ultimately help your marriage, because that person has to ask themselves, why am I so clingy? Or why am I overly clingy? You know what I mean? And you might discover some stuff about yourself, that may need healing, or may need to be rectified, So I know that's a tough thing to deal with sometimes, because, especially when you kind of, into that honeymoon phase, where you are always together. It's, everything is roses, and, you're still in that phase, but there comes a time where, it has to be that. And then, you know, knowing that going into marriage, but it has to be that that time away from each other is healthy, you know, and I think it makes your marriage even stronger. Ironically, time away from each other actually makes your marriage stronger, you know, where you would think the opposite would be the case, you know. But yeah, go ahead, Dion.
No, all I was going to say is having that space or having that person basically around you all the time, it's like it kind of hinders that growth, like you were just saying, like needing that space to be able to express yourself more. Yeah. So if you smother something, like basically when you smothering that person, like you can basically push them over the edge as far as things that they're willing to share.
Right.
Me and my wife, like, you know, before I get that time to myself or before I decide to just say, you know, I'm gonna go do me, like I'll always interact with her. I'll always ask, like, you know, what is that you want to do today? You know, what can I do for you right now in the moment? Do you need me to take the baby off of your hands? Or I'll just take the baby right now. So later on, I can have that time to myself.
Right.
And, you know, I don't know if y'all boys paying attention. Y'all see me on the video game a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just me, like, whenever I have a little bit of time, like just me decompressing, processing what's going on as far as what to do next. And she always say, why are you always on the game? I'm like, video games are problem solver. You know, you can solve problems with the video game or whatever. Like you basically are the one that's creating the world around you and such. So I always tell her when I play the video game, I'm processing. And then when I come back to you, you get all of me so I could, you know, work out whatever it is that we got going on next.
Right.
That's you sound like an introvert like me then, you know. Sometimes you just need like, because I dealt with this before early on, just because there's kind of, so I'm an introvert naturally. So again, needing that space to kind of recharge. But then my wife's, one of her biggest love languages is quality time. So that quality time, her spending time with me, and I'm not to say that it's not the same for me, but it's a lot of fun. That's like where she recharges, you know what I'm saying? It's just that during that quality time. And so it was kind of hard to be like, you know, I kind of just want to like go play basketball or something, or but she's just kind of like, well, I want to spend time tonight. I don't want you to go play basketball. I want to, you know, let's hang out, watch a movie or something. So it's just kind of a little bit of that tug and pull, just based on how we are as individuals. So again, just communication. And this is I feel like this topic is such a good segue from communication, which was last week.
It is.
Those things need to be communicated. You need to communicate how you feel and communicate about your personality and communicate, you know, how you need that certain amount of time and find some compromises somewhere where you guys can meet in the middle. I feel like that's how you create a good, lasting, you know, healthy boundary.
Right. I like how you guys talk about, like, sometimes you make deals with your spouse. Like, it sounds kind of funny, but you make deals. Like, hey, you know, if I clean the kitchen real quick, take the trash out, like, you good if I go do it, you know?
If I change all the baby diapers today, then tomorrow you're gonna hold it down, right?
Like sometimes you got to do those things, you know, like because you want to have balance. I know right now we're talking about how important it is to spend time alone, away from your spouse, but you also have to have balance too. You want to make sure that you're not doing that too much, and you do give your spouse that quality time, because that's important. You don't want to feel like your spouse doesn't want to feel like, you know, man, they'd much rather be with such and such than be with me. You know, so make sure you have that balance in your marriage where, you know, there are times where you need to stay in. You know, maybe you've done X, Y, and Z already a few times that week, and your wife is like, well, I just wanted to sit and watch a movie. You know, sometimes you got to kind of understand that balance and that, like you said, that tug and pull. Because, you know, sometimes you had enough time with the guys, or ladies, you have enough time with the ladies. Like, spend that quality time with your spouse. Give them that time that they're craving. With you. You know what I mean?
No, I'm just
This dude over here laughing.
I'm just laughing at the fact that it's some people who are married and they don't even want to be around their wives, like, or husbands. Like, what do you get married for? You know, like they got the super boundary. You know what I'm saying? Like, husband come in the room, they walk out.
That's an unhealthy boundary.
You know what I'm saying? It's like,
I
probably get to unhealthy joints, but yeah, it's like
touch on it, bro. Touch on it.
Yeah, bro.
You spending all this time with the fellas, and you know, you come home, you just either go straight to sleep. You know, you look at your wife, she look at you like, I stayed up for you. You know, I got this right here. I got this for you. You like, I'm gonna go hit the bed. Wake up, and she's staring at you. What you been doing? You know what I'm saying? Like,
there's something going on. There's some deep-seated issues that need to be worked out in that case.
Some imbalance.
Yeah, bro. So I just think about the cats out there who don't want to even spend time with their wives, don't want to be around them. The women who, you know, look at their husbands and they just hate them. Like, I just can't stand that dude. Like,
and that happens over time, gradually, you know. And when you don't have those boundaries like set, that's clear boundaries. I feel like that's a good key. The boundaries have to be clear and communicated and known throughout, you know, the relationship. And so if you don't have that, you know, if you don't have that ticking, you know, maybe it comes with Holy Spirit too. I feel like you have to be prayerful in your marriage, because your Holy Spirit will guide you on those times where and prompt you where the decisions that you need to make. So like you said, Kenny, it's like if you been spending too much time, or maybe you haven't spent enough time that you want alone or away from your spouse or whatever, just because we're using that as an example. The Holy Spirit will guide you and say, well, your wife needs a little more, your spouse needs a little bit more love in this area. So take a back seat to your ego or whatever, however you feeling for a second, and kind of cultivate your wife or your spouse in this area, because they need that right now in this season.
That's good.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. That's good. Yep. And when I think about boundaries as well, another type of boundaries I like to talk about too is boundaries with your spouse's personality. Boundaries with their likes and dislikes, right? You are not the person or not the agent of change for your spouse. It's not your job to change your spouse into what you think they should be, right? So we have to, a perfect example, and it's kind of a silly example, right? But, you know, I've never liked cooked carrots. I like raw carrots. You know, I'll chew on them boys like Bugs Bunny. You know, throw a little, what's that, Doc? I get a little ranch, baby, you know, but there's something about the texture. I never really liked them. And my wife knows that, you know, but sometimes she'll cook them and then she'll be like, here, they're good. You should be eating these. Why do you like these? I just don't, baby. I just don't. I don't really like them. So then she'd be surprised when I don't eat them. I'm like, I already told you I don't like these. Like, what's the surprise? So then she'll come and then the next day she'll make them again, or the next week it's just like time will pass and then she'll make them again. And I'm looking at my plate like, you know, I won't be mean about it, but I'll just kind of skip over that. And she was like, oh, why didn't you eat your carrots? Maybe you already know I don't like cooked carrots. Like, what's
you looking at my plate?
What's the play here? Like, you trying to you trying to like magically convert me or something? Like, you know what I mean? Hey, like, yeah, bro. It's just a silly example of a bigger issue where it's like sometimes you have to make sure that, you know, although you have to embrace the differences that your spouse has sometimes, because those are good. You know, sometimes you learn from the personality differences of your spouse, you know, and if you're trying to like constantly like make that person more like you, or constantly trying to say, you know, you should be more like this, or why don't you do this more? And sometimes that can cause like that person to kind of be like, you know, shut down, or whatever the word I'm looking for is, you know. So what are you guys' thoughts on that?
I think that's a communication boundary. I feel like comparisons in marriage are very destructive, and can be, and criticism can be destructive too, especially when you're overly critical.
Overly critical, that's good. Touch on that.
Yeah. And it's funny. I was reading, I forget who the author is, but the book is called is that Mr. Tisdale?
Jumping on it, jumping on.
Pastor,
they got
just at
that
the right
boundary
moment.
right there. You know, they got that unity boundary going on right there. So they in that protective bubble. And hey, that's what marriage is. That's the perfect example of marriage right there.
There you go.
You know, being unified. My bad, Cal. I didn't mean to cut you off, but look at that example right there.
Straight up.
Ain't no boundary right there that could break what they got in between right there. You feel me?
Facts. But I was gonna say, yeah, it's how to win friends and influence people. So that was the name of the book. Dale Carnegie, I think that's his name. But he talks about in the first chapter, he talks about how criticism can be a killer in a relationship. And so it either if it's the way you use your words, but when you criticize rather than I have some notes on this, so my bad on that. Yeah. But your tongue, it should be to cherish and to honor your wife, right? And to edify rather than critiquing or comparing her to someone else, especially, or to something. So yeah, criticism kills your partner's most attractive qualities. And like you said, you can be learning from those qualities and start embracing those qualities because they can shut down and lose the ability to feel confident about themselves just because you're criticizing something that's about their personality.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. What's up, Mr. Tisdale? I didn't think we had to expect you today, sir.
No, I didn't think so either, man. Having computer issues.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, man.
Well, as you jump on real quick, we're just touching on the boundary of your spouse's personalities, likes and dislikes, and how it's not your job to change your spouse or be overly critical. But yeah, Cal, that's good stuff. You don't want to be that spouse that's constantly poking at your spouse because of the fact that they're different from you,
right?
Because that person might shut down, on you. And now don't get me wrong. There's sometimes when you have two people come together, sometimes your personalities rub off on each other, right? There are some things that my wife has learned from me over the years that and it might have caused her to change up herself a little bit, and vice versa, right? There's some things that being married to her, I have probably changed about myself, just kind of being with her for so long, right? And there's times where we need to have serious conversations about certain things about ourselves that need to change, probably. But also at the same time, that delicate balance of respecting the person's personality and understanding that they are who God made them to be. And we have to ask yourself, are you trying to make this person in your image, or are you trying to, or should you be respecting who that person is made in God's image? Whether that is personality, whether they do like something and you don't like it, or vice versa, making sure to give them that space to be themselves, because ultimately, we can't change our spouse anyways.
Yeah.
Right. The true agent of change is the Holy Spirit, right? True agent of change is God himself. Right. And there have been times where, there's some things that I may have wanted my wife to do different. And it's like if that change even happened, it happened over time, and it happened with prayer.
Yeah.
That I may have maybe dropped a seed, maybe had a conversation or something, but ultimately, there are times where I'm like, okay, you know what? That's how she is, or that's just her way of dealing with that, or that's her way of talking about this, and respecting that. And then sometimes it causes me to be quiet, because then I can, so.
What you say earlier? You was talking about
criticism.
I feel like criticism can sometimes, I don't know. I think it helps, man. Like, as far as like what you don't like, what she can do better, or what you can do better. Like, I feel like as the man, I get critiqued all the time because
I feel you.
She see me, you know what I'm saying? So I'm like, okay, I could switch this up right here, if it'll help as far as making you feel good or feel comfortable, then yeah, I could do that. But or if you don't want me to act like a hoodlum all the time, switching that up, I can do that too. So I feel like critique is necessary sometimes, man. Even as far as how we think marriage should be and what the boundary should be. So
yeah. And I was speaking to being overly critical too. Yeah, because that can be an issue. But yeah, like you said, I think critiques for sure, healthy critiques that come from love, that don't come from this anger space or anything like that. There's a healthy way to do it. There's a healthy way to receive that as well. And so I feel like you got to really be in tune with yourself to be able to receive criticism correctly. But yeah, I was thinking more in towards of critiquing their personality too, is can be destructive. So it's just more so it's cool if, we're talking about, well, you need to take out trash more, or you need to do this a little bit more, just trying to critique and make us better or make them better. Because that should be the game. That should be the aim, is to be authentic and, basically build up our spouses.
Yeah.
So I should keep my interest as far as like me wanting to be on the block, hanging out with my people because this is who I am. And my wife telling me, you need to switch it up. Is that what you mean?
No, critique is necessary sometimes.
Yeah.
Critique is necessary sometimes. I've grown from my wife's critique of me.
Exactly.
I've grown from those tough conversations. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes our wives or our as husbands, our critique is valid. And it may take us working through some things to really find that out. Because I used to have that kind of critique in my own marriage. Cal, we talking about taking the trash out, something simple as that. And sometimes I would be hard-headed. But then over time, that critique, like, oh, okay, I've heard it 3 or 4 or 5 times. Maybe I need to kind of get on taking the trash out more. But I mean, it's necessary and it has to be balanced though. Yeah. But there are some things that are just like, they're you. And, that person, that your spouse needs to respect your individuality.
Respect my hood.
There's that compromise that comes in,
Yeah.
My wife knows that sometimes I talk a lot. And is that something that I could get better at? Absolutely. She's giving me that. She's giving me that critique, but she knows that's also part of my personality too. And it's the same thing with my wife. Sometimes she don't talk enough, and I'm like, you should talk more. But I also have to respect that, it's going to come when it comes. Just I may not. I just have to be patient sometimes.
What you think, E? What you over there smiling about, bro?
You ain't talking about. You talk a lot.
That's why I had to break him up real quick. Hey, what you think?
Oh, that's hilarious, guys. Small thought process though about criticism. I do find criticism is necessary. I find it necessary in a place of love. Yeah. So the Bible tells us in so many different ways that God is love and the importance of love and how we should live in love. Now we know love wins, right? So we know in the midst of criticizing each other or being critical of each other, or I will say this, loving on each other. I'd rather utilize that versus criticizing. Right. And to me, loving on each other tells a person when they're doing something that could hurt them or doing something that can harm us or doing something to that. And let me say this way, love wins, but love also warns.
Yeah.
Right. So because I love you, I tell you, please don't do that. Or if you touch that, that's going to happen. Or I believe if we go this way, it's going to cause this for our family. For example, I want to go out and buy a Tesla, but I won't go out and buy a Tesla because it doesn't make sense for us to do that right now. And it's very costly, right? So if I were to go out and just do that, my wife was like, listen, don't do that because we got these other things we got to take care of first. That's warning me, like, that's going to mess us up. And that's a silly example, but that's a simple example that because we love each other, we express times of warning and times where we need to be like, all right, step back, don't do that. And also biblically, like criticism to me, there's one thing to say, hey, you make me feel this way. And I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's necessary, specifically in marriages. We have to be able to express what we feel.
Yeah.
And then respect each other's feelings. Because
exactly. Yeah.
I've always said that this might be harsh, but I always said that your feelings are your feelings, even though your feelings may not be true.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to negate the facts of that they're your feelings. That's my main point. Like, we all have to evaluate what we feel to know whether or not it is truth. And where does truth come from? It comes from the word of God. It comes from the Holy Spirit. So if our feelings are connected to the Holy Spirit, it's gonna be the right feelings. But if it's connected to something else, then it's not truth. Mm-hmm. So we all have to be able to evaluate those things. But love warns, but also love wins. And I come from a perspective of not criticism, but of love.
Yeah. And you have to understand why you feel like that. Mm-hmm. If you're feeling a certain way, sometimes you got to slow down and realize, why am I feeling like this? Mm-hmm. Is this something that is, necessarily godly, or is this something that's coming from another place? Mm-hmm. So that happens in marriage too, because there's sometimes, you may feel a type of way, or you might be a little irritable, and you have to kind of explore, why am I like this? Do I need to go step away and have some prayer time? Is this something that I push under the rug that I need to talk to my wife about? Mm-hmm. So understanding that, and that it's just the boundaries of knowing why you feel a certain way and exploring that, and a lot of times in marriage, for me to continue to be a healthy husband, sometimes I have to learn how to just examine myself. Sometimes, why did I say that? Why am I feeling like this? Why am I having these thoughts?
True.
And then sometimes God will kind of shed a light on something. Oh, okay, I got to deal with that.
Mm-hmm. How far do y'all go as far as like knowing where a boundary is and like trying to, ride on the fence as far as seeing how close you can get to something and then having that limit and being like, okay, I'm good. Or, I'm gonna do this, or I'm gonna get on my wife's nerves for a while, but I'm not gonna make her angry. What excuse me, what limits do you have, or how do you know when you get into the point of no return as far as trespassing over a boundary within your marriage? Like, it could be flirting with somebody, or spending time with somebody that, it's taking time away from your wife as far as you helping out with something, or doing too much work or something. Like, what's
man, you gotta let the Holy Spirit lead, I guess, man. Because there's so many nuances in marriage, and every person, each one of us has a wife with a different personality, and then there's some things about them that only we know. Mm-hmm. Or there's things about them that, we've just learned over the years to how to like touch on that without going too far type thing. Mm-hmm. So I think some of those things are just like, make sure you're leading in love and make sure you don't cross that boundary. You might toe the line a little bit, but knowing when enough is enough, or when too far is too far. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
How do you know though, if y'all ain't set that, you ain't set that limit, or you ain't set that line? How do you know when too much is too much?
That's
like, you can be spending time with your personal, with your family, having personal time, and you're away from your wife, and she just like, come home. You don't come home enough. You always at your mom's house, or you always at your dad's doing something.
Yeah. Are they right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are they right?
Evaluation point.
Yeah. And that's a evaluation point, and might have to have a conversation.
Okay.
Hey, why do you feel like I'm always with my mom and dad? Do you really feel like that? Well, I think, I think that's where it kind of starts. And that stuff, is just some truth to that. Is that person being a little too clingy? There's some kind of push with that, and that's where I think they going back to last episode, communication.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And earlier we talked about another boundary, which I was talking about, understanding also too that you have to have your own relationship with the Lord. Husband, wife, don't matter. You can't try to, your spouse, no matter what the movies tell us, spouses can't make you happy. Now there's some happiness that comes from being married. Obviously, there's happiness that comes from that union. There are people for a reason that are single that desire to be married. But at the same time, if you don't have your own relationship with the Lord, you sometimes can fall into that trap of looking for happiness from your spouse, looking for them to fill every need. And they are not capable of doing that. Only the Lord can. Only the Lord can satisfy your soul. So sometimes we don't get the need met, I guess, a certain need. Now, obviously our spouses should fill certain needs in our lives, right? But ultimately it's God who's going to leave you soul satisfied. Only God can really provide you that joy, right? Only the Lord can really provide you peace. And you're not going to get that from your spouse. We're all flawed individuals. So just making sure we keep that in mind too, that, your spouse can only do so much. And if you're looking, your expectations of them might be too high sometimes. And you got to realize, why do I have those expectations? So touch on that, guys.
Go ahead, E.
I can. So I had a thought process, Cam. What question do you want me to answer before I give you this thought process? It's shifting though a little bit when it comes to boundaries. Give me the question one more time.
Well, I guess I didn't really have a question. It was just understanding that you can't meet all the needs of your spouse.
Yeah. So that's a good point. I think a lot of times we try to take the place of God. And I think understanding is that we both need the Lord first, and then we need our spouse second.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we mix that order up and we say, my wife comes first, family comes first, my boys come first. You know what I mean? And naturally, it sometimes happen, and all of us, right? And I'm gonna put my family first, and the problem with all of that is if you put anything before God, that's going to become your idol. And so we have to be careful that we don't put all our weight in one area, such as our wife or our kids, but our full weight is in God, and He'll lead us onto how to love, how to be as a man, how to be as a woman, how to be as a father, how to be as a son. And that is so key and so important. And honest truth behind it, I have to remind myself every day that my help comes from the Lord. My guidance comes from the Lord. My trust is in the Lord. You know what I mean? And then sometimes we can get so deep into trusting our spouse to provide answers, specifically in certain situations. Maybe it's in a disagreement. Maybe it is in some area that we're struggling, and we want to find people to give us answers, and we don't typically go to the Lord first, or we don't seek the Lord and wait until He responds. Right. If God is not speaking as fast as we think He needs to, we go find someone else to hopefully give us the answer. And the truth behind that all is that we have to trust in God more than we trust in other people. And our spouse is the closest thing to us. So my thing is, what I'm saying is basically trust God before you trust your wife. And I'm not saying don't trust your wife. I'm saying trust God first. Yeah. And then God will teach you the right way to trust your wife and love your wife. Yeah. And be with, you know what I mean? So I don't know if that answers your question though, Ken, directly, but
that's perfect.
Yeah. So and on top of that, to piggyback off that, there's your husband or your wife is going to disappoint you in some way, form, or fashion.
Every time.
Every day.
Your husband or wife is going to maybe fail you sometimes, right? So you have to make sure that you know that, because your spouse, like I said, they're responsible for meeting certain needs, but ultimately you have to have that relationship and be grounded in the Lord, because that's where it really comes from. And if you're not grounded in the Lord, you're not going to, you're not going to get that from your spouse.
And you're going to respond differently, because if you're not grounded in the Lord, that response is going to be most likely negative, and it's going to give you a negative viewpoint of your spouse, just because you're not finding that joy from the Lord. You're not finding that grounding or that base from the Lord. So anytime your wife or your spouse disappoints, you're going to receive that differently.
Yeah.
Just because you're looking to them to fulfill certain needs, and you're putting too much of your weight, like he was saying, your weight and your trust in them, rather than finding that from the Lord.
Yeah. Right.
And what that does too, Cal, Ken, D, is that when you put all your weight into them, and going back to your point, Ken, and they let you down, it's the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when you put your trust in God, you now see other people as, listen, we're all imperfect.
Right.
Yep.
And we're all going to make mistakes. And you can love someone through that versus criticize them and condemn them because of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Boom.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother boundary. Be able to
spiritual boundaries.
Yeah, like have space for your spouse to be able to come back to you to reconcile. Like, don't just shun them and shut them out and just make them feel like dirt. Like, have some space for forgiveness, have some space for, coming together so y'all can mend whatever was broken.
Yep.
Yeah. Isaiah 58:11 says, the Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your soul in drought. So yeah, just cementing that point of your satisfaction comes from the Lord.
Yeah.
Making sure, I like Ernest, you touched on something good, like making sure that your spouse is not your idol. That's so good, because that in marriage sometimes, you put that person on a pedestal, and to a degree you should, right? That's your wife. That is the number one woman, right? Women, the number one, your husband should be your number one man in your life, right?
And only man.
The only man, right?
And only
number one and only, right.
Both sides, man. Straight meal, both sides.
We ain't got number twos and number threes out here,
Right.
My number 2 and 3 is my daughters. I'll give you that. But
there you go.
That's what
I'll give you that.
And that's what I mean. Like, number one woman, as far as when you factor into daughters, not friends, but mothers, stuff like that. Yeah. But making sure that you have that. It's just a lot of that is just balance, man.
Yeah,
a lot of that is just balance.
For sure. I do have a question though, since we're talking about healthy boundaries. I read an article and I wanted to actually ask some questions to see what thought is. I don't know how much time we have left on the podcast right now, but what do we got, Ken? A few minutes?
I don't even have a timer, bro.
Okay.
Like 10 minutes.
All right, bet. So should your wife or should you have access to your wives or should your wife have access to your phone?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
I'm gonna say yes.
I don't care. Honestly. I honestly, like, even before getting married, like coming straight into the marriage, transparent, like, look, this is my password. This like, I don't know what's gonna happen to me. So if it's something that we need as far as a resource, I want you to have access to it. So I don't care.
I don't see why not.
Yeah.
Unless you got something to hide.
Yeah, right.
Dying with secrets out
You
here.
became an investigator, like unless you hiding something,
Dying with secrets that can hurt your family because you want to be secretive and you're doing the wrong thing. You die, it's a wrap.
Believe it or not, people think that's healthy, not allowing their spouse to have access to their cell phone, which to me is totally unhealthy in a Christian relationship. Yeah. Should they have access to your social media account?
Yep.
Yes.
Because I want them to know who in my DMs, so you can't blame me. Don't blame me for nothing.
Exactly.
You see the conversation. You see me saying I'm married, like, and it's just all hypothetical. We good, but I'm just saying, like, what's going on.
Yeah.
Who hitting you up in the DMs, Dion?
Hey, let it out, D.
Hey, yo, I'm a
Real.
man.
You want
I'm
me to
real
expose
here.
him? You want me to expose him? No, just
Calling me.
No, man, we all good this way, man.
Yes, sir.
Another question, another thing was that maybe your spouse is not good at communicating. Kim kind of, no, you didn't mention this way, but you made me think of this. Maybe your spouse is not good letting their feelings out. Should we respect them and not just leave it alone? Or should we continue to try to pull those feelings out? What should we do in those situations when you know there's conflict and one side is not fully expressing what they feel? They kind of bottle everything in. How do you respond to that?
Tough. Go ahead,
Kenny.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I mean, I think you should be open and honest in a relationship, especially in a marriage, right? So if someone's holding something back, I think that needs to be worked on, but in a strategic way. And we talked about criticism, how that can be a killer. So it's like not so much criticizing, saying, you never let out your feelings, because that's more of a character assault. You don't want to assault your spouse's character, but there's a difference between a criticism and a complaint. A complaint focuses on a behavior or a specific situation. So maybe, when something comes up, you start cultivating an environment of, hey, I saw this happen and you responded this way. Why did you respond that way? Just to help them, guide them on how to open up. So I think it's just strategic conversations without being overly critical. For those reasons.
I would say create a safe space to be able to express yourself too. Like, even if you are like in a state where you may be angry at the person because they're not releasing those feelings and you criticizing them right there, like they'll bottle up. Like you said, they'll never be able to express themselves. So you got to be able to create a safe space. Like, look, I know, we going at it right now. I'm just letting you know that I'm willing to speak about it. We don't have to speak about it right now, but it needs to be resolved before, certain actions take place. So I may leave out of this house. I'm mad. I'm angry. Something may happen to me on the way back home. So before I leave the house, or, you got to be able to just have that safe space so you can express yourself and let them know that they can too.
Yeah. And that's a good question, because some of the things that we deal with in marriage are a result of trauma. So we have to understand that too. And those are really delicate conversations. If for like your example, somebody who bottles things up, who doesn't really express their feelings, or they may not know how. Why is that? And a lot of times, sometimes when I think that in certain cases, counseling is very healthy for a marriage. Both individually and marital counseling, because it helps you kind of really explore yourself and why you are the way you are. Some people, husbands, wives, you grew up in a household where people didn't talk about their feelings much, or some of us as men, we grew up saying, thinking that it wasn't too masculine to talk about your feelings and your emotions. It wasn't masculine or manly to be like, yo, you hurt my feelings. You know what I mean? So I think working through those things, and once the Holy Spirit kind of helps you discover those things, or your spouse sometimes brings that up, not being slow to anger, where you're like, oh no, I'm not like that, or right, say, oh, maybe she has a point. Maybe why don't I really? Because you might have a spouse that always talks about their feelings, and they're looking for you to kind of reciprocate that. Like, hey, can you give me some? Like, you don't really talk about what's really going on up here. You kind of just shut down. That's a problem. And that person has to hopefully, get to the root of why they don't express their emotions, and hopefully heal. Some things in marriage just take some healing from the past.
Straight up.
You know what I mean? Some healing from your childhood. So yeah, that's kind of what I thought about when you said that.
Yeah, man, you almost got me on another topic on that. Started talking about marriage trauma. Let me not touch it, because we'll go way over here. Next question is it okay to have relationships with the opposite sex in your marriage? Maybe it was somebody you grew up with, as in this case, as a female, is it okay to have those relationships still? And maybe you go visit, or maybe you on the phone. Are those relationships okay?
That's a good question. That's why I love you. You come up with the good questions.
I can answer real quick, bro. So my wife, she knows all the women that I interact with, and none of the relationships was, like over friends.
She know their addresses.
Yeah, she know the names. She know where they live. She reached out to a few of them.
She know where they sleep.
So
joking.
I mean,
go ahead, bro.
no, I feel you. I hear you. Like, your wife got to know if you're gonna interact with whoever, because whoever may want to secretly try to have a Kenny over their house or something.
Yeah.
But no, like my wife, she know all of the people, all of the women that I interact with. So like, if I say, oh, so and so texted me, like, she's like, oh, okay, what's so and so talking about? I'm like, okay, so and so talking about this. She's doing this, and all of the women that I know, they married too. So that's another thing. The women, like, they cool with me, but we all knew each other before we were all married, and then we all got married, and they met my wife, and my wife know their husbands. And I don't know. I feel like if your wife know the people, spend time around those people, then I say it's cool, just because y'all all have an understanding of boundaries and have an understanding of who each other are or is.
All right.
And I think,
okay, Cal, I'm sorry.
no, I was just gonna say it's boundaries, is important in this scenario. And I like practical boundaries, like, there's no, so I wouldn't suggest riding alone in a car with, person of the opposite sex, or spending too much time alone with that person. So there should be boundaries there. There should be boundaries on how you communicate to that person of the opposite sex, friend or no friend. That's just, so those should be some clearly communicated boundaries if you have those types of relationships.
Yeah. I mean, short answer for me is yes. But I think that, yeah, obviously boundaries, I'm gonna be careful how much time I spend with that opposite sex, but I think it's okay. I think, we should it's okay to have a relationship. It means, like, I'm married now, so I can have no friendships with women. Like, I think that's a little extreme.
Mm-hmm. I feel like if you can't bring your wife around them,
then... there's your wife right there, huh?
Yeah,
she just said something. I couldn't hear what she said.
If you can't bring your wife around the person that you know of the opposite sex, then that's a sign right there.
That's a sign too. And if you don't feel comfortable bringing up your wife around this person, that's a clear indication that something's not right. Something's off too.
Yep.
So you should be
yeah.
Go ahead.
You good?
Well, I think no. I was gonna say something, but I didn't want to cut him off.
Oh, okay.
We want to be careful. Like we have to be able to trust our spouses at the end of the day. So do you trust your spouse? And like we got to be careful. Like sometimes women can sometimes characterize men as just this overly sexual being. Like, if I just spend 5 minutes with this woman alone, something's gonna happen. It's like, we're not always like that. You know what I mean? Like, obviously you got to create certain boundaries and certain things where, you don't do, but it's like, oh, you was with her by yourself at such and such for 5 minutes. What was you doing? Like, sometimes it makes us kind of feel like, dang, like, you don't trust me? Like, you don't think that I would be like, you don't think I had you in my mind? Like, no, I'm good on that, or whatever the case is, Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I hear you.
Yeah, like, so that's why I say yes, because if you can't be with the opposite sex without doing something, is that the woman's fault? That might be something going on with the guy that he need to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you spending 5 minutes around somebody that ain't your wife, you gotta, she gonna ask the question, like, what was y'all doing? Why was you even there? Like,
of course, but yeah, I mean, I guess that's, to me, that's extreme. Like, you can't have a relationship with other women while you're married. I think it's obviously boundaries that, it goes without saying, and making sure you're careful and to that effect. But a lot of times, it has to be, who is this person? Are they a believer? You know, do they have your best interest in mind? Do they know your wife? Do they know you're married? Like all that stuff, you know, obviously. And sometimes that's in a relationship where, you know, if that other person is single, they know, oh yeah, that's a boundary I don't cross, you know, But I don't know. Sometimes you know, you might, I don't know.
It's a whole bunch. Go ahead, E.
So I'm sorry, fellas. So there's a lot of details to this, and we probably can spend a lot of time on this. So let me talk just a little bit about boundaries, or ask a question about it. So are the healthy boundaries when it comes to a relationship with the other sex, is the parameters, okay, is it they must be married and they must know your spouse and they must there's no long time spent with them? What is the healthy boundaries around that? Because this is real dialogue that people are actually having and wondering, specifically in marriages. So if we can hit that up.
Yeah. I mean,
ahead,
that's just certain things I wouldn't do, you know, to put myself in a compromising situation, you know.
Right.
It's just like, I'm not gonna go on a lunch date with a person of the opposite sex, you know, if it's not completely necessary. I'm just not gonna do that. If I trust myself or not, whatever, I'm just not gonna put myself in that position. So I don't know. I guess I would throw that out there. It's just certain things I wouldn't do.
You don't know who may be seeing you either on that lunch date. It could be somebody from your church. It could be one of your homies. Like, hey man, who is this right here? Like,
you don't want to muddy those waters. You know what I'm saying? Just keep it clear.
Well, yeah. I mean, it should be like hey, you want to go out to lunch? Yeah, sure. You know, I think there should be some kind of purpose to it. If that's something that's going to happen. Like, for example, what if we're working on a business deal and that person want to discuss it over lunch? I might potentially ruin a business deal because what? I think something's going to happen out of it.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, not like at the table, I'm going to just take my clothes off. Hey, you know, like, you know what I mean? Like we have to, I guess what I'm trying to say, there's a delicate balance between boundaries and knowing yourself, but also trusting your spouse to make the right decision, you know, to enforce those boundaries, because you're not going to always be with your spouse, but you know, when the time comes, it should be total transparency. Yeah, we talked about this, you know, we had this is what we talked about. Here's my text. This is everything that was said. There should be nothing hidden.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I don't know. I think it depends on the situation, but I think that, you know, just hitting up such and such, like, hey, let's go out to dinner. And I was thinking about you.
Yeah,
like, obviously
that's wholly different.
Right.
Yeah.
But you know, what if we're working on something? What if we, you know, my wife can come along too?
Yeah.
You know?
You got to do stuff to make sure that you cover your tracks too, bro. Like, what I mean by that, you going on that business meeting over lunch with somebody of the opposite sex, you hit your wife up. Like, that's first thing. Like, hey, you know, I'm finna go to this business, you know, meeting, whatever. You don't necessarily have to hit your wife up, but I'm just saying, like, you hit her up just in case you out and about in a place where other people may know who you are, and then they see you out with that person of the opposite sex. They're like, what's going on?
Right.
You know, so you'd be like, you know, first off, none of your business, but
yeah,
like I said, like, just, you know, letting your wife know, like, hey, I'm going on this business lunch. We going here. You can slide through if you want to, but, you know, I'm gonna be here. If you happen to, you know, see me out or somebody say something, just know that this is what's going on.
And it's somewhere public. You know what I mean? So it's like, if I have to have in a situation where I need to meet with somebody one-on-one, because it may be a great opportunity or something like that, you know, and the person's like, yo, you know, let's continue this conversation in my hotel room. Then I'm like, nah, I'll catch you another time. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, I guess, just being balanced, man, and just being smart, using common sense.
Right. We're talking about common sense for sure.
Yeah.
And we're talking about boundaries, and a big boundary, an overarching boundary is trust. And I feel like you don't want to do anything to break that trust boundary in your relationship, because that's hard to come back from if you can.
It is.
You know what I'm saying?
That's good. Yeah.
Let your wife know. That's it, man. Let it know.
No. Hey,
what are some of your thoughts, Ernest, on our answers?
No, I think 100%. I think everybody's right on their response. So I'll start with D's response. Letting your wife know where you are and what you are doing and what is going on is also key. I practice that like crazy. I had a situation where someone called my wife and said, "Hey, you guys know I think this was in Grand Rapids." And someone called my wife and said, "Oh, I saw Ernest getting in a car with another lady off a certain street."
Mm-hmm.
She's like, "I don't listen. I just want to let you know, you might want to, you know what I mean? You might want to check that out. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what was going on, but this is the lady. This is what she looked like. And this is so the funny thing with all of this
agents in the field.
Yeah. I mean, when you know enough people be like, "Oh, who's that?" You know what I mean? What's going on? You know, people peeping stuff out like that. So it's important that your wife is aware of what's going on. So in that time period, someone's actually dropping me off to get my car repaired and they were taking me back to work. So that was the situation. But my wife knew what was going on. So when she thought about it, she was like, "Oh, okay. Where was this? Oh, okay." And then so she came and told me about it. I had no issues because we've already talked about what was about to happen in this whole situation. So it's key that your wife is aware of what's going on, because it gets scary when you're just doing stuff, even though they could be okay items. You can play that trust barrier. You're going to be fighting against that when she's like, "How come you didn't tell me?" You know what I mean? Now I will go over to the other side too, Ken, and say, knowing yourself, you mentioned that. I think that is key, because if you know you have a struggle, in particular with the opposite sex, and maybe the opposite sex that you're cool with is attractive. Maybe they are utilizing language they shouldn't be utilizing, and we know it, but we continue to entertain.
Right.
Maybe we are tottering the line or on the line, and we're on there trying to just like low key flirt, but trying to keep it professional at the same time.
Yeah,
those are all the things that number one, you need to be aware of, because you know what you're doing and you know what this could lead to.
Yeah.
So anytime you have those type of relationships, those things need to be cut off. Yeah. Hands down. And number one, that means you need to deal with yourself in that arena, in that area. And God needs to deal with your heart in that area. So a lot of us try to justify and saying, "You need to trust me," and knowing that I won't do anything wrong, but we know in our heart we already doing something wrong. So that's
just waiting on that moment. I can't wait to
definite heart check. Exactly.
That's that self-examination.
Exactly.
Examining your own motives.
Yep. Now the ministry side of me, fellas, will say that I never met with a single lady, and honestly, I never met with a lady by myself in ministry. I never done that. Meaning one-on-one. Like I don't do counseling to women. I don't do that. If we're doing any type of counseling session, I mean, you guys know, we have people over our house all the time, all different age groups all the time. And I never, if my wife wasn't there, it wasn't like all the girls just came over and I was just there talking to all the girls in high school or in college. I wanted to say, "Yeah, guys, what are we talking about?" I wasn't doing that. No, we ain't doing that. If my wife wasn't around, I wouldn't be having a meeting, even though I knew them for young, and I knew, we know, like I knew all you guys' wives, not yours, Cal, before you, but I knew Jazz, I knew of your wife, but I mean, we were connected. And I all your wives trust me, my wives trust y'all. So, but I just don't do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just out of respect, and also out of what's the word I'm looking for? I just try to keep things in a healthy area. If that makes sense. Does that make sense to y'all?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense.
What do you guys think, though, if I were shifted to ministry, because this is what popped in my head, as a counselor or a pastor, is it okay for them to counsel women?
One-on-one, you mean?
Yep.
No.
I would say no. I would say no. just because a lot of those reasons you were talking about. You just don't want to muddy the waters. You want to keep everything in a healthy space. Because just, I don't know, it's just, there's temptation there, and you don't know what the thought process is going through the other person's mind and things like that. And I don't know, it's just a tough situation. I mean, I wouldn't put myself in a compromising situation like that.
I would say if you're doing it, be out in public. Like,
I feel
if
that
you're doing it, like, I don't like, people need spiritual guidance. You know what I'm saying? Like, people go to psychiatrists all the time, therapists all the time.
Yeah.
I don't think there's nothing necessarily wrong with going to the church and speaking with your minister, one-on-one, in the sense that it's some counsel around him that can interject in what's going on. Like maybe a, pastor, deacon, co-pastor or something like that. If it's like a council of people, I don't think it's nothing wrong with that. But if it's just the pastor or the minister or the youth leader, versus one person and it's the opposite sex, I would say be out in public. That way, the person could, feel comfortable. You feel comfortable because you're not confined in a room or nothing like that. If it's something like that, like, I don't think it's an issue.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I genuinely don't. I don't know. I think there's ways you can do that. Maybe you have a, I don't know, female co-pastor or something that can sit in the session with you, and you still do it. But then that woman next to you, that co-pastor that's female, or maybe even if you're your own wife, if that person is comfortable sharing with that person in the room, will be that accountability. But I don't know. I guess I don't totally say no. I think there's ways that you can have accountability and still pull something like that off.
Right.
And
I don't think the minister is going. I don't think that setting is like, predatory. Like it's a difference between, they can't trust the minister within the church or something, or that young lady may want to just have one-on-one time so she can get noticed or something. Like, I think it's a difference. If it's something like that, then no, I'm not even going to counsel you. I can't do that because your intentions are wrong. So.
And if it's, I guess it depends on the conversation too. If it's marital counseling and I'm just one-on-one with the wife and the marriage, that's tough to justify, because that's just an environment that's really, I don't know, she's having marital issues and just, one-on-one with a man that's listening to her. I don't know. That's just creating some weird situations.
Yeah, bro.
Potentially.
Don't do that. Yeah, don't do that. Yeah.
So what if the person needs counseling, but their husband is refusing to go to counseling?
You want me to answer that?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Anybody can answer that.
So from a perspective of that, I've seen that before and dealt with that before. I would not. Number one, you have someone that's in a place of vulnerability,
right?
So their heart is open to hearing something, and a lot of times in those cases, that there's things that are lacking that that need to be fulfilled. And in those moments, you have someone that's vulnerable, that's taking in everything you say. So my thought process around that is, number one, you don't want to, if you don't want to set things up where you're creating an unhealthy environment. What I'm saying is this: someone can gravitate to the words that Calvin say, or Kenny say, D, or say what I say as a lady, or even opposite sex, either way it goes. And they say, wow, you were so good. All the things you said, even if it could be all biblical, those things were so good and they touched my heart. And there could be an unhealthy connection that happens in that moment. So, and it's not always like that. Don't get me wrong. This is just not how it's always going to be. But to me, it's setting yourself up properly where, number one, to me, in those areas, women, my wife can speak to those situations better than I can.
Right.
As a lady, I can come in and help with any biblical perspective, or tell any scripture, or hopefully give some insight from the Holy Spirit with my wife. But my wife can speak to the women, the heart of a lady. That my wife can speak to the feelings and all that. And I leave that to my wife to do that.
Yeah,
I will join in with her And vice versa. If it's a guy situation, and I'd be like, man, I need maybe my wife to join in this situation. Maybe he's battling something with his wife, and then I said, okay, bring my wife into the situation, and that's just how we operate. And to me, it's
Absolutely.
not only healthy boundaries, but also to me, it creates a healthy environment for your personal marriage, and also for the other individual that may be dealing with some marital issues, where they're seeing how a marriage should kind of operate.
Yeah.
And togetherness. So
I feel that.
It's good. Those are all good questions. Real thought-provoking questions for sure.
Yeah, bro. I'm done though.
I'm
done. I had another one, but I'm done. I'll stop.
Those are good. Those are good questions. Yeah, man. I think this was a good conversation. I mean, even as we were speaking, more and more boundaries started coming up that you guys mentioned that I didn't even think about. You know, the whole single person boundary, like, yeah, those are all good, you know, financial. And there's about probably some other things we probably could touch on, but because of time, I think that was kind of good to not to avoid to belabor the point. But yeah, so anybody who's watching, listening, think about those boundaries, have those discussions with your spouse. Make sure that there's balance. There's balance in your marriage when it comes to all the different boundaries we talked about, whether it's, you know, hanging out with friends of the opposite sex, financial boundaries, resting in God and knowing that He's the one that fulfills your desires, fulfills your needs, making sure you're grounded in the Lord. And also earlier we talked about spending time together and not making sure that you giving that spouse that time to be alone. All those are key. Any other boundaries, let us know in the comment section. Holler at us. Yeah, I think that's it. You guys, any other lasting closing thoughts?
I'll just say one thing. Boundaries should come from love and respect. You know, that's the environment to create a healthy boundary. You do it out of respect of your spouse, and you do things out of love. So, point blank, period.
Word.
Love it, fellas.
Word. So yeah, that is part 2 of the top 10 most common issues in marriage. See y'all next week.
Try.
Oops.